maybe you're behind on your tax documents, let's say, or there's some other stack of paperwork sitting on your desk that you're not attending to because you're afraid. And there may be lots of things in your life that you're not attending to because you're afraid. And so, first of all, you want to admit to what those things are, and you can ask yourself that. Then you want to write them down. Then you want to come up with a strategy for starting to deal with them. So like if it's a stack of unpaid bills that you're terrified of and that you've been avoiding for a few months or even worse, you're going to be pretty damn afraid to even take a look at the problem. But it'll almost inevitably be the case that if you take a look at the problem, a detailed look, the reality will be less terrifying than the specter that your imagination has conjured forth. And maybe the thing you can do for the first day when you decide to actually turn around and face the dragon, let's say, is all you'll do is open the file folder with all the documentation of what you're avoiding in it and just glance through it, like for 5 minutes, just to break that paralysis. Or maybe you have to spend 15 minutes gathering the dispersed documents that are in whatever the hell passes for your filing system together so they're all in one place. Some move forward. And so what you want to do is you want to think about what it is that's producing negative emotion in you, your doubts and your concerns. And then you want to develop a strategy of incremental approach. And that will also fortify you, partly because you reduce the number of things that you're afraid of by actually dealing with those things so they go away. You actually solve the problems, but also you train yourself to see that you're the sort of person that doesn't have to run from their problems no matter what they are. And that deep learning that you are that sort of person is in fact the solution to the problem that you're describing with regards to severe anxiety. Now, the other thing I would say too, and I don't know anything about you obviously, is you think that your anxiety and perhaps associated depression is psychological, right? And you think that the reason the SSRIs are dealing with it is because they're having a psychological effect, but there are a lot of reasons to be anxious. So, for example, there is good evidence that depression, in many cases, and associated anxiety, let's say, can be a consequence of inflammatory autoimmune problems. And you can look that up for yourself, the relationship between depression and immune dysfunction, especially inflammation. And you got to ask yourself, is there something wrong with you that's making you anxious? You may be physically ill in some complex way. My daughter and members of my family have had a lot of good fortune treating high levels of negative emotion with dietary alteration. As you may know, because it's somewhat well known, we only eat meat. And there's a huge literature emerging on the utility of ketogenic and carnivorous diets to redress serious physical and psychological disorders. So my daughter has done podcasts with a psychiatrist at Harvard, for example, at McLean Hospital, who's been investigating this quite deeply with regard to schizoaffective disorder, which is a very serious near psychotic disorder, a very deep problem that looks like it's physically rather than psychologically grounded. And the data on the carnivore diet in relationship to disease control is extremely positive. Now, there's not a lot of data yet. The studies are hard to do. But don't be so sure that the reason that you're miserable is because there's something wrong with you psychologically. It could easily be that it's the secondary consequence of some physiological illness that's going to be somewhat difficult to specify, right? Because autoimmune problems, the sort of autoimmune problems that cause inflammation, are difficult to specify. So you might want to figure out, do you have allergies? Do you have psoriasis? Do you have any other signs of autoimmune trouble? That's one way of starting. And any other physical illness-like symptoms, because that can help you triangulate on what might be driving your anxiety. But don't assume that it's all psychological, because it could well not be.